Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Journey Together set review for GLC TV. One of the most fun things to do with any TCG is to talk about the new cards and how we think they'll be played or impact the format that we play. This set review will only be for the Gym Leader Challenge format. You can check out Gym Leader Challenge at gymleaderchallenge.com. It is a fan-made format that follows the expanded card pool. No rule box Pokemon are allowed, only one copy of each card, except for basic energies, and only one type in each deck. But this time I'm going to try to go through each card a little bit faster. I'm just going to stick to my notes, which you can find actually linked in the video description. It'll take you to a Google Doc. You'll find the ratings for every card. So if you don't want to sit through this whole video and just see my spark notes on each card and see what numerical rating I gave it, you can look there. You can check out my other videos that I recently released about the Hops Pokemon archetype and the new Whale Lord, which go way more in depth on those cards. So the way this works is I'll be assigning each card a ranking after I talk about the card a little bit. I will give it a ranking from 0 to 5, and I'll explain what each rank means here. So zeros are going to be cards that are more or less unplayable in the format and should just never go in a deck. Ones are going to be cards that can technically do something useful in GLC, but are generally just not going to be impactful enough or strong enough to really be worth using for an advantage. A 2 means the card might be useful in certain niche scenarios, but is probably too inconsistent or too underpowered to be a really strong card for the format. A 3 is a card that is going to be good, but in the right deck. So it won't be good in every deck of that type. 4s are cards that are consistently good and will likely be played in every deck of that card's color. So 4s, you kind of get into the staples for a type of card. And a 5 is a card that is so good, it will likely affect not just its own type, but force decks of other types to include answers and possibly adjust their strategies to account for the card existing. And that will also include colorless staples that can go into every deck and will probably be played in every deck if they are colorless. Or not colorless, but you know what I mean, typeless. And if you disagree with any of my rankings and think I've overrated or underrated a card, please let me know in the comments. That's one of the most fun parts about getting new cards that nobody's played with yet. At least in GLC. I know they've been playing with these cards in Standard for a while. Before we start the set review, I like to put up the optimal evolving basics that get released in the set. So these are basic Pokemon that they're not doing anything exciting on their own, but they evolve into important Pokemon. And because of either their HP, their retreat, maybe their ability or an attack, support attack, they're worth playing over older versions of these cards. So there you go. I think there's only 2 this set, so you can see those on the screen. I guess for those listening, it's Wailmer and Swinub in fighting type. Okay, so let's get into the review. So starting off, we have Butterfree. This is a stage 2, 120 HP, and it has a attack for 1 grass energy, 60 damage times you flip 4 coins, and it does 60 damage for each heads. And if you get 2 or more heads, the active Pokemon becomes paralyzed. So yeah, this one's, I mean, it's a coin flip card, pretty silly, super cheap though, 1 energy. And it's important to note that Butterfree can evolve on the first turn because there is a Caterpie and a Metapod in the format with the adaptive evolution ability that lets you evolve them on the first turn or the turn that they are played. So this can come out swinging for just 1 grass energy. That is worth noting. Also, there is a coin flip archetype for grass. I believe Moo Milk has a video on the topic, and I've featured it on this channel as well. The fact that it paralyzes is no joke either, and it will do that often. So that being said, I would give this Butterfree a 2 out of 5, but I think it's a more on the gimmick side than it is on the competitive side of things. Maractus. So this is 110 HP basic in grass. The Bursting Needle ability. If this Pokemon is active and knocked out by damage from an attack, you put 6 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon, and then for 1 colorless, it does 20 damage, and the defending Pokemon cannot retreat during the next turn. So this can be a decent wall that can sit in the active spot while you set up and punish your opponent for attacking. Unfortunately, the ability does not trigger if they just damage Maractus. So if your opponent's using random like utility moves that deal damage, they're not going to be taking 6 damage counters for doing that. You have to knock it out. So, but that being said, 6 damage counters will significantly soften up whatever is hitting Maractus. It's very rare that a good player will walk into this and make it so that the bursting needle ability like gives you the exact damage you need. They're going to attack it with some throwaway Pokemon that they don't care about it taking damage. They're not going to attack it with their Whale Lord or their big tank that that 6 damage is going to matter. The corner attack the attack is interesting. I'm not going to use the attack names here. By the way, shout out to PokemonProxies.com. This is the site I'm using for these card images in English, but these translations are not official. So I'm going to try to not use these attack names because I don't want to confuse people when the actual English attack names are out. Anyway, the attack that lets you stop retreating, that can be very powerful in a control deck, but from my knowledge, Grass is still lacking some tools to make a really good control deck. And there's lots of switches in GLC, I think more than in other formats, or at least in standard. Usually decks are playing around 3 to 5 switch cards at least in GLC. So I'm going to give Maractus a 1 out of 5. Moving on. Oh, we have a Pokemon that's not on here because it was released much earlier. The Lilligant. So this is 110 HP stage 1, which lets your grass Pokemon do 20 extra damage. And so this is important because there is another card that has the same ability, Lurantis, and these two stack with each other. So if you can get both of these out, your grass Pokemon will be doing 40 extra damage. And if you play this in a deck where you have grass Pokemon that can attack twice, including Jumpluff, Rapid Strike Jumpluff, and the Festival lead Diplin, you're basically getting an 80 damage boost to your attack with those two out. So really good combo, force multiplier with those two. It is kind of its own little archetype. It does go kind of crazy if you can get set up early because you can start doing, Jumpluff does 60. So you can start doing 100 damage and then 100 damage. You can take double knockouts. The Diplin, I think, does 200? Or no, it does 100. A base if you have a full bench because it's do the wave. So you're doing 140 and then 140. You could easily take 2 knockouts with the Diplin, although you do need the stadium in play. So a little bit of a gimmicky kind of deck. Takes some setup, takes a little bit of luck. If your opponent has either resistance to grass, so if it's a metal deck, or if they have any kind of abilities that reduce damage, so pot helmet, shell armor, stuff like that, those get counted twice against your double attackers. And so that's pretty crippling. So if you think about like a Zamazenta with a pot helmet and an energy on it, that's a 90 damage reduction times 2. That's 180 damage reduction. So this deck can get really hosed really badly. Although they do have things like Torterra that can try to deal with that. But I think the double attacking grass deck's a little precarious to play, but it's a lot of fun. I've seen it in action. But I'm going to give this one a 3 just because I think in its deck, in this double attack grass deck, you want it. You absolutely want this. All right, next up we've got Excelgor. This is 100 HP for stage 1. For grass and colorless, does 70 damage, and the active Pokemon is now confused and poisoned. And then you switch Excelgor with one of your bench Pokemon. So this is a cool hit and run attack. Very efficient. Effectively doing 80 damage with the poison. Combo it with the Maractus we just talked about, right? Switch out to the Maractus. Now they have to attack the Maractus. More likely you're going to be switching out to like a Pokédoll. Is probably the best way to do this. Something similar that you see in Hitmon Bros with the Hitmonchan is they switch to the Pokédoll so that your opponent, when they go to attack you, they're not going to take a prize. If you can then find a way to recycle those Pokédolls, you can do this over and over. Again, very easy to disrupt this. Of course, you just need a Gust. Everybody's playing Guzma. Lots of decks are playing Boss. You've got Escape Rope, stuff like that. And but maybe this with with the Maractus can get a grass control deck going. I can see the pieces, but I think the problem is grass doesn't have a good way to recover items in an attack like other types do that are playing a control strategy. So I think this has potential. I think once grass gets something that can get back items on an attack, um, so you can recycle those Poké Dolls a lot more easier. I could see this being an interesting deck. So 2 out of 5 for Excelgor. I do like hit and run attacks. Next up, we have a Meowscarada. This is a single prize Meowscarada. 160 HP on a stage 2. And we've got the ability is it's basically stand in or step in for you old school players. So once during your turn, you can switch Masquerada from the bench to the active spot. And then the attack is 2 colorless energy for 90 damage. It does extra damage against the X's, but that is going to be irrelevant for our format. But stand-in is a useful pivot ability. We see this used in Dark with Zoroark to make certain strategies work a lot better. It's got the 1 retreat for the U-turn board. This is useful when you have attackers that are doing things like, when you use attack, you can't attack next turn. Those effects reset when they switch. So ideally, you want to be able to like double switch and switch it to the bench, get that attacker back to the active. Then it can just use that attack again. The other thing you can use a pivoter like this for is when you have attackers that inflict status on themselves. So either confusion or sleep, like Snorlax, right? The thumping snore puts itself to sleep. Very hard to wake up. When you have a pivot in your deck, something you could do is similar to this. The problem is though, grass doesn't have a Snorlax that does that. The closest thing I could find was like a Blossom that does like a coin flip attack and then it confuses itself, but really not worth trying to get that set up and then set up the Meowscarada as a stage 2. Right now, we're going to have to say 1 out of 5 for Meowscarada, but keep this card in mind if grass ever gets cards that, inflict status on themselves or say they can't attack twice in a row. All right, moving into fire, we've got Magmortar. So the ability says that during checkup, you put 3 more damage counters on your opponent's burned Pokemon. So that means they're going to be taking 5 damage counters between each turn because it's 2 for the default. And you can stack this with other cards like Pyroar or Infernape. So those cards modify how much damage burn does, but they don't add damage to burn, so they don't stack with each other. But the Magmortar will stack, so if you have the Infernape doing 6 damage counters plus the Magmortar, you're putting 9 damage counters for burn on something, which is quite a lot. Unfortunately, burn's a little harder to do stuff with than poison. There's no basics Pokemon that can just burn something off an ability. So you can't donk anything turn 1 like you can in Poison. But there are some interesting options. I think Burn has a really interesting archetype that is being set up here. Something you could just do with this, and I think that's what I've seen people in the Fire Gym doing right now, is using attackers that do, mediocre damage, but they inflict burn. And then this Magmortar is effectively, plus 30 damage to those. So things like Armarouge does 90 damage and burn for 3 energy. That becomes with a Magmortar and a Pyroar 70. So that's 160 if you've got Magmortar and Pyroar for 3 energy, which is decent. Ninetales is really good, 2 energy, 90 damage, burns and confuses, I think. So again, the 160 for 2 energy is good on a stage 1. There are ways to burn things, but unfortunately, they are Pokemon that you don't want to be cutting, or you want to have better versions, because Magcargo and Salazzle and Delphox are your best options for burning things before you attack them. Probably Delphox would be the best one to run, because I think Fire cannot afford to lose the Magcargo Salazzle engine. But you could play around. Maybe you could give up the Magcargo. I think the Magcargo is really good because it means no matter what they put in the active spot, it's going to be burned unless they evolve it after they switch it in. But yeah, there's fun stuff. Check out the Fire Gym in the Tricky Gym Discord. Folks are building lots of cool burn decks there. For Magmortar, 3 out of 5. It's clearly best in class for this specific archetype. You're definitely going to want to play this if you're going to try out the burn deck. Next up, we have our first owner's Pokemon, the Ens Darmanitan. So these are, I'm going to talk a little bit about owner's Pokemon. These are a returning type of card, originally from the WotC era. They have a trainer's name in front of the Pokemon's name, but together they make it a unique name. So it is similar to how stuff like Alolan Vulpix is not the same as Vulpix. There's two different types of cards. So in this case, Ens Darmanitan is different from Darmanitan. So you can actually run both in your GLC deck, but Ens Darmanitan has to evolve from Ens Darumaka. So you cannot use any other Darumaka. This is the only one you can use, which is unfortunate because this one only has 80 HP, which means you can't search it out with Buddy Buddy Poffin. And I don't think there's any Darmanitans really worth running. So, but that will come into play later. As for this card, 140 HP on a stage 1. It's got 2 attacks for 2 colorless energy. Does 30 damage for each energy card in your opponent's discard pile. So that can ramp up probably maxes out around 180 damage if we're being realistic. You probably won't see more than 6 energies in the opponent's discard pile, and that would be very late game. But honestly, it's probably going to be, even in the mid to late game, probably about 90 damage, but it can get up there. But the headliner attack for this Pokemon is the 2 fire and a colorless energy for 90 damage. You discard all energy, and then the attack does 90 damage to one of the opponent's bench Pokemon. So this is big, very similar to Radiant Greninja in Standard. And this is big because obviously you can take 2 KOs with this. Pokemon that can get 2 prizes on one turn, very important in GLC. You have to pay attention to those. Now, obviously, discarding 3 energies, very painful, even for fire, even though you've got stuff like Blacksmith that can get 2 energies back. Those supporters are still at a premium, and you need those to power up the rest of those, because fire's attackers are not cheap. Burning heat energy will reattach itself back to the Darmanitan. You've also got options like boomerang energy could do it. Recycle energy obviously can go back to your hand. And then Power Glass is a tool that will put the fire energy back onto the Darmanitan after it attacks, which is really nice. So yeah, I think being able to take 2 prizes in a turn with this with 1 attack makes this definitely worth looking at. And I think a lot of fire players should be paying attention to this card and seeing if there's a way to fit it into their decks. I'm going to give this one a cautious 4 out of 5. I just think that anything that can take 2 prizes in a single turn this well is worth looking at and including in trying to fit into any fire deck. All right, moving over into the water type. All right, is the Ludicolo. So stage 2, 140 HP. And the ability is that each of your Pokemon get plus 40 HP. Plus 40 HP to your whole team. So that includes itself. So it has 180 HP effectively. So we're looking at, when you look at this card, you kind of have to look at what's being played and how the numbers break down to decide if it's worth including the stage 2 in your deck, taking up a bench slot and eating up search cards and stuff like that. It stacks really well with damage reduction. So I think for the most part, so special whales basically, I think this will be really good in special whales. But I think everywhere else, I don't know that it actually helps with the math. So I'm going to give Ludicolo a 3 out of 10. I had it at a 2, but now that I'm looking at how effective it is with the special whales, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. All right, next up we've got our boy Wailord. I made a whole video about this card. Go watch it. But this is a 5 out of 5. This card is nuts. 240 HP, and then you can just boost it up from there. And it does 210 damage for 4 energy. This card's insane. Moving on. Oh, another card that is not on proxies is going to be Regice. So I'm just going to talk about this really quick. It's a 120 HP basic, and it has the second attack is 80 damage for a water and 2 colorless, and it does 10 damage to each of the opponent's bench Pokemon. So I'm just calling this out because I know Water Spread is kind of a fringe deck that people like to talk about playing with things like the Rain Form, Cast Form, and I guess the Krabby. I don't think it's very good. 3 energy for 10 damage to the bench. So yeah, Regice, 1 out of 5 for the Regice, but worth mentioning because of water spread. Okay, another card to talk about that was not in the Japanese set, but is going to be in the English set, is the Alolan Golem. So this is stage 2 lightning type. So we are in lightning proper now. Stage 2 lightning type, 180 HP, has 2 kind of interesting attacks. The first one, for 1 lightning energy, you flip a coin until you get tails. For each heads, it does 70 damage. 25% chance to do 140 for 1 energy. Not great. It does have a second attack that is 1 lightning and 1 colorless, so 2 energy for 160 damage. Unfortunately, it does do 40 damage to itself, which invalidates that nice high 180 HP. But 2 energy for 160, there's not a lot of lightning Pokemon that can boast that kind of damage efficiency. It is on a stage 2. However, I have seen, Skeledirge in Fire from the last set has been doing really good. And it's mostly just because it's 2 energy for a really big attack. This doesn't hit as hard as Skeledirge, and obviously it doesn't have the tankiness Skeledirge has. But it has a pre-evolution Geodude that for 0 energy can attach 2 energy from the deck to itself. So early game, you can charge this up, and then if you can get this thing out, or there is actually a Graveler, a Alolan Graveler that does, for 3 energy, it does 100 damage, but it does 100 damage to itself, so it would knock itself out, unless you put a protection cube on it. So I'm talking about this because I'm starting to see a pattern in this set. There's a couple of lightning Pokemon that do self-damage, and there may be an argument for looking into Protection Cube as being an archetype now in Lightning. I'm going to keep my eye on this Alolan Golem and see if it fits into a deck like that, or if Lightning needs a 2 energy, 160 damage attacker if they can swing the stage 2. But right now I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. I don't think this is super strong or even super worth building around, but it does something. 2 energy for 160, decent. 2 out of 5. All right. Next up, we've got Iono's Voltorb. So it's 70 HP for 1 retreat cost, and for 2 colorless, it does 20 damage plus 20 more damage for each lightning energy attached to all of your Iono's Pokemon. I think if we ever get a energy doubler in Lightning, like Charizard or Venusaur, then this will start to get really crazy, right? Because then it's doing 40 more. So you're looking at 100 damage for 2 energy, 140 for 3, 180 for 4. Still okay. Okay. Well, maybe not. I'm going to give this guy 1 out of 5. But I thought it was worth looking at. We'll look at its evolution here really quick. Iono's Electrode, 100 HP on a stage 1. It does 100 damage for 2 lightning and a colorless, but the headliner attack here is 2 lightning, and it says this Pokemon does 100 damage to itself, so it'll knock itself out. But you flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out. Again, I don't like this card. Oh, well, I didn't say that yet, but I don't like this card because it's not coin flip. You could try to use Will to fix the coin flip and get a knockout, but I don't know that it's really worth it. I think this makes more sense in formats where they have big multi-prize Pokemon with huge 300 plus HP. You won't get the extra prizes from something like Luxurious Cape because you're not dealing damage. The only reason I'm really even mentioning this is because it fits into this Protection Cube theme we're seeing. Also, you could put a HP boosting item onto it, and then it won't knock itself out immediately, at least. That's kind of a meme. So 1 out of 10, probably garbage. All right, Iono's Kilowattrel evolves from Iono's Wattrel. It is a 120 HP stage 1, and it has the ability, you must discard a lightning energy card from this Pokemon, so not from your hand, from the Kilowattrel. And if you do, you may draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. So very similar to Revavroom in Metal. However, you do have to attach the energy to Kilowattrel somehow. Although that means that you don't have to have energy in hand to use the ability like you do with Revavroom. You could get that energy onto the Kilowattrel with something like Flaffy, even if you have no energy in your hand, and then you'll be able to draw with the Kilowattrel discarding it. Works really, really well in Magnezone Lightning, which I've already mentioned, since, if you can play as many energy from your hand as you want, you're basically just discarding it from your hand. There's no cost to having to attach it to the Kilowattrel. But during setup, you don't really mind that you're not attaching energy because you're trying to get your energy acceleration set up still. So it's good in the early game as well before you get the Magnezone out. And yeah, so I think this is going to be super good in Magnezone Lightning. I think Magnezone Lightning is going to getting a lot of great tools from this set, probably because again there's a belly bolt that is for standard that has a rain dance effect. So they put in a bunch of tools that are good in rain dance type strategies, and we're going to see a couple more of those once we get to the trainers. But Kilowattrel, 3 out of 5. I think you are definitely playing it if you're playing Magnezone. Not sure about if you want it in a regular Lightning deck. I think Zebstrika is still the correct draw engine for regular Lightning without Magnezone. But I think this is a strict upgrade over Zebstrika in a Magnezone build. All right, moving on to the Psychic type. First one is Banette. That's a weird looking one. So Banette is a 90 HP stage 1. So level ball searchable. It's always worth noting. And the main attack is Cursed Speech for 1 psychic energy. Your opponent shuffles 3 cards from their hand into their deck. Oof, some hand disruption. And then second attack is 1 colorless and 1 psychic. It does 70 damage. This is a delinquent on a stick is what I have here. Basically a Pokemon attack that delinquents your opponent. Instead of discarding, they shuffle into the deck, but it's still very strong hand disruption. But the combo with this is to play it with something like Zerosic's Machinations, which makes them discard down to 3 cards, and then you make them shuffle the rest of them away so they have no cards in hand when it goes to their turn. You can also use it with cards like Red Card, Marnie. Those take them down to 4. Iono N if they are on 3 prizes. Although at that point, they're probably pretty set up and it's not going to be as effective. This is most effective in the early game when they're trying to set up and they don't have all their cards in play. Particularly good with ability lock if you can get a Garbodor out and shut off their abilities so that they can't draw back into a good hand with Bibarel or Octillery. Shutting off their card draw, their onboard card draw with Garbodor is really good. Or if you could just even Hex Maniac the turn you play this, can really set them back and cripple them for a turn, basically a time walk. And then it has a decent follow-up attack that can pick off their evolving basics. Everybody's playing 70 HP evolving basics these days for Buddy Poffin. So if you cripple them in their early setup, you prevent them from evolving, then you can start picking off the basics with Spooky Shot and taking prizes that way. This looks like a pretty strong card. I don't know all the implications for Psychic Control decks. I don't know if they want this card or not. I'm going to give this guy a 3 out of 5. I certainly think he's best in his own deck. I don't think you're going to splash this into some random Psychic deck, but he does seem quite strong, I have to say. Next up, we've got a Metagross, Psychic type Metagross. Not the Stevens Metagross. We're not getting those until the next set. Metagross is 170 HP stage 2. For 1 psychic and do 60 damage, and for 2 psychic energy, it does 130 damage. Although if you have a Beldum and a Matang on your bench, this does 150 more damage. So yeah, that's going to be pretty difficult in a singleton format, although not impossible for psychic. But yeah, for your stage 2, I think you want to be doing more than 130. 130 is the magic number for hitting most big basics. But by the time you're getting stage 2 attackers out, your opponent's probably getting much bigger attackers out than their 130 HP big basics. There is a cool achievement you can get with this though. If you can get Hypno and then attack with Reuniclus, you can get Beldum, Matang, and Metagross all on the table at the same time in separate bench slots, and then hit for 280. You could also use Dream Ball to try and do that. So there's an achievement unlockable with this, but it's not really competitive. It's certainly funny though. 1 out of 5 for this Metagross. Okay, we've got En's Sigilif, a new alternative victory condition. 110 HP on a basic. It's an ends Pokemon. Does 20 damage for 1 psychic energy, and then a psychic and 2 colorless. If you have exactly 1 prize card remaining when you use this attack, you win the game. So I think this is the first time we've seen this in Psychic in GLC, but it's not the first time we've seen this attack. There's a Slowbro in water that has pretty much the same attack. I believe the attack is called Walk Off Homer. And yeah, I mean, this is funny, but it doesn't really seem worth it. Generally, once you get down to 1 prize, you're going to be taking that 1 prize. I think if you do end up in that situation where your opponent manages to checkmate you with 1 prize left and you just can't get through and get that last prize, I doubt having this in your Psychic deck is going to make it so you would have won that, because you still need 3 energy on this to use this attack. You still need to get it into the active slot to use the attack. So if you're energyless or locked down or whatever, there's so many ways this just doesn't work. So 1 out of 5 for Ends Sigilif. And moving on, we've got some Lily's Pokemon. Lily's Rabombi. I'm just going to mention this quickly. It's a stage 1 with a ability that lets you look at your opponent's hand when you play this and put all their basic Pokemon you find there onto their bench. Don't play this, just play Pokepuff instead. It's an item card. It does the exact same thing as this ability. This is a 1 out of 5, probably a 0 out of 5. And then we've got the Lily's Comfey, which 70 HP lets you search out any number of basic Lily's Pokemon and put them onto your bench. And by the way, these are the only 2 Lily's Pokemon for GLC. The other one is a Lily's Clefairy EX, which is quite good, but not good, not playable in GLC. And then it can also fade out 30 damage, and you can put it back into your hand. If you're trying to do something with fade out, just play Scoop of Net instead. 1 out of 5. Sadly, Lily is not looking to be viable in GLC. We have one more card I want to talk about, which is this Grimmsnarl, which is from the starter decks, the Japanese starter decks, and were put into this set. Most of those cards are not good enough or not very good, but some of them are interesting and worth talking about. So we have 170 HP stage 2 in Psychic, and for 1 energy, it does 50 damage times the number of pips in the defender's retreat cost. So if they have 3 retreat costs, your 1 Psychic energy does 150 damage. And for 2 energy, for Psychic and a Colorless, you do 120 as your backup attack. So kind of interesting. At first, I kind of wrote this off as not being good, but then I actually looked at what the retreat cost spread kind of looks like in GLC. And this can take KOs on a decent number of Pokemon for 1 energy, including Iron Boulder, Raging Bolt, Heatran, Tinglu, Electivire, Snorlax, Kyogre, Regidrago, Galarian Weezing, Rhyperior, Copperajah, all of the Copperajas, Ursaluna, Torterra, Steelix, Earthquake Donphan, Venusaur, and Guzzlord. And I was kind of surprised how many Pokemon have 4 retreat nowadays. There's also some combos you can do with this. You could put a Gravity Gemstone tool on it, which will effectively increase Grimmsnarl's damage by 50. Makes Hop's Choice Band look pretty terrible, doesn't it? And then you have Galar Mine, which increases the retreat cost by 2. So with a Galar Mine, this is doing plus 100 damage for 1 energy. So it's kind of a neat combo. So I'm going to give Grimmsnarl a 2 out of 5. I just thought it was worth mentioning. Next up, we have, here we go, Regirock. So 130 HP basic. It has the Rock Armor ability. So the same as Zamazenta's actually. If it has an energy attached to it, it takes 30 less damage. And then its attack is 120 damage for 3 energy, and it is not affected by resistance. But it costs 3 fighting energy. Can't use any other color other than fighting to pay for that attack cost. So I thought this was interesting, so it has the same ability as Zamazenta, which is quite durable for a basic Pokemon. It takes 160 damage to knock out this basic if it has energy on it. Importantly, though, that ability reduces damage not just from opponent's attacks, but also your attacks. So in an Earthquake deck, he will basically take no damage from your Earthquake effects, so his durability is not affected. That's kind of one of the weird things about Earthquake decks is you have a hard time using like durable threats to deny prizes from the opponent, because if your durable threats are taking a bunch of splash damage from your earthquakes, it makes them a lot easier to knock out. I love ignoring resistance, by the way. I really hate that they give random stuff fighting resistance that shouldn't have it, like psychic types that don't have any kind of immunity to fighting in the video games. I want to see more resistance hate on fighting types that can hit through it. The problem here, ignoring resistance is meaningless when our attack is 30 damage under par from what it should be. This is for 3 non-colorless energy. We should be doing way more than 120, even on a basic. I wish this was fighting colorless for 130. I think that would have been way better and made this a lot more interesting. But unfortunately, I think it's just a little bit understated. The attack is not good enough, especially compared to the other Regirock we have, which is fighting colorless for 140, and it has the Regigate to search for basics as a setup attack. I think that one's just better. But I could see this card having a home in tanky fighting decks, possibly with Rhyperior and the new Surging Sparks Donphan, since it does play well with other fighting's other tanky cards. It has the Vest, I think Rocky Vest or something, that is basically another pot helmet, and fighting also has Stone Energy. I had it at 1 out of 5 because I was so angry about the attack. I'm gonna give this a 2 out of 5 now that I think about how many damage reducers fighting has access to. 2 out of 5 for Regirock. Okay, Lycanroc, 120 HP on a stage 1. Pretty bad. Its ability is when you play this card from your hand, you can attach up to 2 spiky energies from your discard pile to this Pokemon. The spiky energy is a colorless special energy in the set, and the attack is for 3 colorless energy, 40 damage, and does 40 more damage for each damage counter on the active Pokemon, on the opponent's active Pokemon. Unfortunately, you only get 1 energy acceleration as opposed to the intended 2 because of the singleton nature. So you get 1 spiky energy from your discard pile. Spiky energy is basically a Rocky helmet on an energy. It's colorless energy, and when the Pokemon's attached to is dealt damage, the attacker takes 20 damage back. So you need 3 damage counters to be on the defending Pokemon to deal respectable damage. With 3 damage counters on it, you're doing 160 damage, so you'd be able to knock out something with 190 HP. 2 damage counters on it means you're doing 120 plus 20 is 140, which I guess is decent. You can knock out big basics with that. So 2 damage, decent. I actually was going to write this off as being bad, but I realized that it could actually be decent in like a Palisand Tinglu deck, like a spread fighting deck, with that's playing double colorless energies. So I'm going to give Lycanroc a 2 out of 5. And next up, we've got the Hops. First Hops Pokemon is going to be in fighting, Hops Sandaconda. So we haven't talked about it yet, but I've talked about it in one of my other videos. There is a tool card for Hops Pokemon called Hops Choice Band. It reduces all Hops Pokemon's attacks by 1 colorless and increases their damage by 30. And so if you can't tell, that is an absolutely broken card. So with keeping Hops Choice Band in mind, we're looking at Hops Sandaconda. It's a stage 1, 140 HP. It's got 2 attacks. First one is fighting in a colorless, does 30 damage, and the defender can't retreat during the next turn. And then for a fighting in 2 colorless, we've got 140 damage, and it does 20 damage to each of your own bench Pokemon. So an Earthquake variant. So it can fit into Earthquake decks. So looking at it in the context of the Choice Band, though, the first attack with a Choice Band, with Hops Choice Band, is doing 60 damage for 1 fighting energy, and stopping them from retreating. And then with the Hops Choice Band, the second attack is a fighting and a colorless for 170 damage, and that can be easily powered up with just like a Colossal. Also, the basic has a pretty good setup attack that gets you a Stadium card for a colorless energy. Unfortunately, it has 80 HP, so that's unfortunate. I don't know why they keep making 80 HP basics when they just made Buddy Buddy Poffin. But I think Sandaconda has potential both in Colossal decks and in Earthquake decks. That specifically Earthquake decks that are trying to use double colorless, like with Great Tusk. I wouldn't play it in like a lo-fi deck, even with the tool, because you have to find the tool. and you're probably gonna have to play a way to recycle the tool in case you have to discard it. But I think it's totally viable to play Hop's Choice Band with just a single target in your deck, because 2 energy for 170 on a stage 1, super good and definitely worth it. So I'm gonna give Hop Sandaconda a 3 out of 5. And we got one more from the no, not the last one. We got another one from the starter decks. Toad Scroll. It is a 130 damage, excuse me, 130 HP stage 1, 3 energy for 80 damage, but the ability gives reduces all of your Pokemon's retreat cost by 2 as long as Toad Scroll is on the bench. And if it's in the active, you have to pay the 2 to retreat it. Yeah, this is interesting, but looking at fighting, there's pretty much 0 bench synergy in fighting, like stuff that you want stuff to be on the bench to do something. Like in Metal, they have Bronzong, which attaches to the bench. Flaffy attaches to the bench. There's nothing like that in fighting. I think just play Floatstone or Air Balloon instead of this. This is not good. Don't play this in your fighting decks. Moving on, we've got, all right, Tyranitar. So 190 HP for a stage 2 darkness type. And its ability is, while it's in the active spot, your opponent can't play item cards from their hand. And then for a darkness energy and a colorless energy, it does 150 damage. And you discard the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. This is an insane stage 2 that comes back down to earth once you realize that there are no darkness types, Larvatars, or Puppetars for you to evolve it from. But the reason I have it here is because there is one way to get this into play, and that is with Dream Ball. And Dream Ball is kind of a constant meme in GLC of that's how you get Pokemon into play that are off type from their evolution lines. This might be it. Like, I think this might be the one thing that is worth getting with a Dream Ball. The stats are insane. The ability is insane. The attack's insanely good. I just feel like this could be worth it. It is still, the ability does still get countered by things like Boss's Orders and Guzma, as well as Hex Maniac, and things like Wobbuffet, and I believe Galarian Weezing turns it off as well. So there's lots of ways to counter the ability, but what do you guys think? Is this worth playing Dream Ball for, or is Dream Ball still just terrible? Let me know, but I'm giving it a 2 out of 5, and I don't care. Next up, we've got our second Darkness Pokemon, Bombardier. It is 120 HP basic. For 1 colorless energy, it does 20 damage, but the main attack is for 2 darkness energy and a colorless. You can do 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, and you have to discard all energy from Bombardier. So it's a Galarian Articuno without the good ability. I mean, Snipe is cool. Maybe you're just better off playing a Boss's Orders, though. And you definitely need an energy accelerator, so it might be worth playing in a Hydreigon deck where you could possibly power it up quickly and take early knockouts on important bench Pokemon. But yeah, I guess without that, I was thinking Galarian Articuno is good, but without that ability to power itself up, it does get a lot worse. The metal type that we're going to be talking about is Magearna. And so for 90 HP basic, as long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, whenever you attach an energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon, heal 90 damage from that Pokemon. And then its attack for 1 colorless does 20 damage and draw 2 cards. So yeah, this looks kind of interesting in a tanky metal deck with Archaladon and Copperaja. It kind of fits perfectly. Yeah, this is really interesting, and it's got that good attack. That attack is really good for setup if you draw early game. And yeah, this looks good. And I love that it's colorless, so you can use it with a capture energy. I love playing capture energy in my metal decks, and then I can't use that draw ability with my capture energy. It's so frustrating. So I like that this one you can use the setup attack with a capture energy. So yeah, Magearna, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I think this looks really promising for tanky heal decks. Moving on to Dragon. Oh man, that Corviknight was so sweet though. If Metal could play this, 170, 50 damage Snipe. That also does 50 damage to the active for one energy. 150 for 3. That reduces damage by 60. This Hops Corviknight is insane. So we have Druddigon. 120 HP basic. For one colorless, does 20 damage, and you get to attach a basic fire energy from your discard pile to one of your dragon Pokemon. And then it has slashing claw for 3 energy, a fire, water, a colorless, and does 120. I saw a lot of people were talking about this, kind of excited about this card for dragon. Hopefully that hype died out because I think this card is terrible. You can only attach fire energy from your discard pile with that attack, so you have to find a way to get the energy in the discard pile first. It has to be a basic fire energy, so incredibly specific. And then you lose out on the Revenge Druddigon, which is doing 160 damage for 2 energy. But yeah, 1 out of 5 for Druddigon. Don't use this in your Dragon decks. Play the other Druddigon. Next up, we have En's Reshiram. This is 130 HP basic. For a fire and a lightning, powerful rage does 20 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. And then it has a second attack for fire, fire, lightning, colorless, 4 energy, does 170 damage. So I forgot to mention for N has an item called N's PP Up, which is basically like a metal saucer or a darkness patch, but just for N's Pokemon. That being said, I still don't think this is really worth running in Dragon. The N's PP Up basically offsets the second attack's rate. Dragon really wants 160 for 3 energy is kind of like the base rate you're looking for. So 4 energy is not what Dragon wants to be doing. You could try to combo this with something like Spike Mooth, which is whenever you switch one of your Pokemon to the bench during your turn, it takes 20 damage. So I don't think En's Reshiram is that great. I'm going to give this one a 2 out of 5. I think our next guy is going to be the Snorlax. I've talked about this Snorlax in my video. It is so powerful. The big belly giving plus 30 damage to all of Hop's Pokemon, including itself, meaning that its 3 energy attack for 140 actually does 170. Does 80 damage to itself, but you can mitigate that with either a tool, although you're probably going to be using the Hop's Choice Band on it, or you could Ninja Boy it back into the deck and bring out one of your other Pokemon like Rapid Strike Tauros and just keep attacking that way. With the Hop's Choice Band, making this effectively a 200 damage attack for 2 colorless energy in colorless. I can understand why Andrew is considering banning some double colorless energy now with this card. This is a 5 out of 5. You need to be prepared to deal with this Snorlax. You need to have answers to Hop's Choice Band because it is going to be super powerful. Noivern is a 110 HP stage 1, very low HP for an evolution. And it has for 3 colorless energy for 110. The opponent's electric Pokemon is confused. And then Tuning Echo. If you and your opponent have, it's an ability. If you and an opponent have the same number of cards in your hands, you ignore all energy in this Pokemon's attack cost for Panic Howl. So doesn't work on TMs. Only works for that Panic Howl, that 110 confusion attack. But if you can match your opponent's hand size, and Colorless has a ton of ways to do this, because it has so many ways to draw cards off the bench, you're doing 110 damage for no energy. That would be pretty good in Colorless, except that the second next card we're going to talk about, Cramorant, makes this card pretty much unnecessary. So Colorless sometimes has trouble in the mid game keeping up attackers without energy acceleration. This Noivern could have been a cool way to kind of keep up the tempo by being able to do 110 damage for free. But Cramorant does it better now for 1 energy doing 120, plus all the damage boosts that Hop's Pokemon get. And this ability also, unlike the the Iron Boulder that does kind of the same thing, although it does 170 on a basic. This thing is based off of the ability, so it will get hosed by cards like Hexmaniac, Wobbuffet, Galarian Weezing, unlike the Boulder, which it's all built into the attack. So Noivern, unfortunately, going to get a 1 out of 5. Colorless didn't need it anyway. Next up, we've got the Hops Double. So this is 120 HP for a Hops Pokemon Stage 1. Headbutt does 80 damage for 3 colorless energy, and then the ability says you can play it when you play it from your hand. You can basically gust up one of your opponent's Pokemon from their bench. This is deceptively strong. I know usually people don't like the kind of comes into play get a one-time effect unless it's Inteleon. But this ability allows turbo colorless decks to be our boss's ordering while they're playing their setup supporters like Guzman, Hala, Colorless, Tenacity, etc. And it can still hit pretty hard if you've got the Snorlax and either a choice band or post-Twick Stadium out. It does 140 damage as an attacker, so that's pretty good. So I think Hopstub will probably, some decks will be cutting it, but I think it is a card worth playing in Hop's colorless decks. So I'm gonna have to give the Hopstubble a 3 out of 5. And our last Pokemon we're going to be talking about is the Hops Cramorant. I've talked about this card a lot already. 110 HP basic for 1 colorless energy. It does 120 damage as long as the opponent has 3 or 4 prize cards remaining. I think this card is actually more broken than the Snorlax. I mean, you need the Snorlax for this to do anything, for this to work. But you don't need the choice band for this to work. If you just have the Snorlax or the Post-Twick out, and you're doing 150 damage for 1 energy on a basic, like that's what colorless needs to take it to the end game, to be able to keep up and keep taking prizes and not stumble. And the secret of this card is that, you know, it doesn't matter how many prizes the Cramorant player takes. So if the opponent stumbles and gets stuck and can't keep taking prizes and go down to 2 prizes left, the Cramorant's going to terrorize them, and it can do that for multiple turns. So Cramorant is a 5 out of 5. I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I know that they're talking about banning double colorless energy and twin energy. I really think the Hops Cramorant is at the top of the list for me for what colorless might need to get banned if this, if things go through. But moving on, we've got Ends PP Up. We talked about this. Basically a Metal Saucer for your Ends Pokemon. And it has to go to the bench, so it's exactly like Metal Saucer. I think it might be worth playing in a deck with Darmanitan, but I think otherwise it's not really that great. Because it can go to your Ends Durmaka as well, at least, so you can use it then. Oh, okay, this is a good one. So this one is, it says exchange ticket, but I believe it's been translated as a redeemable ticket. So it says you count your prize cards, then you shuffle them, and you put them on the bottom of your deck, and then you put that many cards from the top of your deck into your prizes face down. So this is very similar to a card called Rotom Dex, which did the same thing, but it shuffled the deck and the prizes each time, so you didn't necessarily get your prizes back into your deck. The whole point of this is you've prized a really important card. You can't access it. You can use this card, get it into your deck, and then you can search it out with a card, a tutor card, to get it from your deck into your hand at least. And it gives you access to that card. Being able to interact with your prizes and get important card out of your prizes is important for any GLC deck. Most decks are going to be using Town Map to do that, but there's certain decks that really need to get specific cards into hand, even to be able to start attacking. I think Dragon would be one of those. I think Grass really likes cards like that. Problem with this card, though, is that even though you're guaranteed to put all of your prizes into your deck and not lose any of them back to prizes, you're still not guaranteed on what you put from the deck into the prizes. So you could lose something else important in the process of playing this card. I played with Rotom Dex a lot. It's a good card, but it can screw you sometimes because of the randomness of that. This is a nice upgrade, and as long as you sequence things well and you grab all the cards you need from the deck before you play the exchange ticket or the redeemable ticket, you can really help yourself out and get those cards out of the prizes. And because it's an item, it's very easy to search out and play. There's also combos you can do with this where you manipulate the top cards of your deck with stuff like Dream Ball or Greedy Dice, and then you use the redeemable ticket to put those into your prizes, where then you can draw them for an effect. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to give 3 out of 5. Next, we've got Hops Bag, item card that lets you search your deck for 2 basic Hops Pokemon, put them onto your bench. In GLC, you'll basically be getting Cramorant and Snorlax with this, although sometimes you'll be getting the Wooloo, which evolves into the Dubwool, which is another good reason to play the Dubwool. It's very easy to get with this item. This card, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 because obviously I think the Hops Pokemon are very, very strong. And this is just another way to make the deck super consistent and make sure that you always have a Hop Snorlax on turn 1 and you're steamrolling your opponent from the get-go. And the card of the hour is the Hops Choice Band. We talked about this. Tool card, your Hops attacks cost 1 less colorless and do 30 more damage. Absolutely broken tool card. It's a muscle band and a counter gain, but better than either of those two stapled together. This card is totally broken. 5 out of 5. Go watch my Hops Snorlax video or Hops video where I talk about how Hops decks are going to be recycling this card to reuse over and over with their Hops Pokemon. And you might want to start bringing some Lost Zone based removal like Faba or Lost Vacuum to deal with this card. So 5 out of 5 for Hops Choice Band. I think that's our last rating 5 card, and they're all Hops Pokemon, Hops cards. Lily's Pearl is a tool. If it's attached to a Lily's Pokemon, when it's knocked out, the opponent takes 1 fewer prize cards. This effect is broken, absolutely broken. But good thing is there's no good Lily's Pokemon to play in GLC. The only good Lily's Pokemon is the Clefairy, which is an EX, and you can't play it. So 1 out of 5 for the Lily's Pearl. It's not worth it to play Lily's Pokemon to play this. Just play Clefairy Doll instead. It's better. Next, we've got Iris's Fighting Spirit supporter. It says discard a card from your hand. If you do, draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. There's better cards than this, supporters. I mean, there's just way better cards in the history of Black and White on. Morty's Conviction is one I can think of. You discard a card and then you draw a card for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So I would not recommend playing this card. 1 out of 5 for Iris's Fighting Spirit. Next up, we've got the Ruffian. Supporter says discard a Pokemon tool and a special energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon. So it is, you get to discard 2 cards, but it has to be from the same Pokemon. So you can't target a special energy on your opponent's bench Snorlax and then the Luxurious Cape on their active Pokemon that you're trying to knock out. It doesn't work like that. It has to be all on the same Pokemon. So pretty limited, in fact, in that capacity. I don't think you're ever really going to get full value from that. I think if you're going to run a supporter like this, you're better off just running Faba, which Lost Zones the card you get, and it can also hit stadiums, so you can hit their Dimension Valley or their Magma Basin or their important stadiums that they're trying to loop. And yeah, I don't think Ruffian's very good. 1 out of 5 for the Ruffian. Next up, we've got the Brock's Scouting. So this is a supporter, a modal supporter. You can choose one. You can either search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon and put them into your hand. So important that puts them into your hand, not onto your bench. So that's good for Pokemon that have comes into play abilities. Or you can search your deck for an evolution Pokemon and put it into your hand and then shuffle your deck. I like this card a lot. I stay away from playing cards like Gloria these days because we just have so many good items that can search out multiple basics. There's just so many ways to get your basic set up without using up your supporter for the turn and without getting your hand clogged later in the game. I think this will be best in decks that have a lot of evolutions with really powerful abilities, like draw abilities. And that I think that will help make up for, the feeling of using a supporter to find one Pokemon out of your deck. I'm going to have to give Brock Scouting a 2 out of 5, but I really like this card for sure. Next up, we have Ends Castle. It's a stadium, gives all Ends Pokemon no retreat cost. Currently, there are not enough Ends Pokemon in each type to be worth it, and it looks like there are not going to be. There's only 1 Ends Pokemon for each type. I don't see why you would ever play this over a Air Balloon or a Float Stone, because your opponent will bump it, and then you don't have access to it anymore. Okay, next one, Lavencia. So this is a stadium. Once during each player's turn, that player can put 2 basic lightning energies from their discard pile into their hand. So this is an awesome stadium. For lightning, this is basically a Mount Coronet for lightning type. And this is a great boost, again, for Magnezone decks. This is the other card they're getting. Since, putting 2 lightning energy into your hand may as well be attaching 2 lightning energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon. And this gives that deck finally repeatable energy recursion with Lusamine and Cynthia and Caitlin. You can just keep looping the Lavencia back into play over and over again with Lusamine, getting that back with Cynthia and Caitlin. So great card for Magnezone Lightning, giving this a 3 out of 5. And almost there. Postwick. Another Hops card. Busted card. You're going to see this in all colorless turbo decks going forward. Gives all your Hops Pokemon a 30 damage boost. And it makes cards like Cramorant really, really strong, being able to do 150 damage for 1 energy on a basic. 4 out of 5 on the Postwick. And finally, we've got the Spiky Energy. We talked about this with the, what is it? Lycanroc. Pretty much the only reason you'd ever play this, I think. I don't even think colorless decks have room for this at this point. I think they've got so many good colorless energies that this is not going to do it. You're going to see this pretty much just in dedicated Lycanroc decks. So I'm going to give this a 1 out of 5. Might be wrong on this. This might be more applicable than I think, but I don't see people playing stuff like Rocky Helmet and stuff like that. So I don't think this is really worth playing. And that's going to wrap us up. That was Journey Together. Really big set because they had all those extra starter deck cards. The next one's going to be big too, but I think I'm going to split the next one into 2 parts. We're going to do the Destined Rivals as one set review, and then we'll do the Glory of Team Rocket as part 2 for that set. But thanks everybody for watching. Hope you appreciate that. I hope you guys are enjoying the Journey Together pre-releases. I think by the time I get this out, this will be right before the Full Grip Games 1K tournament. So that'll be really fun to watch and see what comes out on top from the new cards from Journey Together. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel so you get notified every time there's a new video, and helps promote the channel to others so that other people can enjoy in some GLC content. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you next time.